start, I wanted to give a shout out to the channels whose footage we'll be using for some clips today. I've got links in the description to their channels. Please go check them out. Please subscribe, interact with them. Without their content and the PQ streams that they show, we wouldn't get the entertainment that we do from watching, and we wouldn't be able to learn from the high quality play that we get to see on those streams as well. I also wanted to mention, in a lot of cases, the commentators are talking about the things that I'm talking about, but I don't have the audio on in order to make sure we're not getting any copyright strikes. So go check them out. Thank you if you are a streaming channel for streaming Star Wars Unlimited.
Welcome back to Wild Space, everybody. We are looking at passing and claiming today as part of our Jedi training series. If you haven't seen the previous installments, be sure to go back and check them out. We're talking about some ways that you can get better at SWU, including some of these more advanced concepts here. We're going to start with passing. Passing can be a powerful option for you when you are playing your game. It potentially lets you leverage situations into ones where you're going to get more advantages out of the actions you take later in the turn. It can also give you more information to make a better decision, but there is some risk to it, as anytime you're passing, you're running the risk of losing initiative, which, given how important that can be, maybe it's something you want to do, maybe not. So let's talk about how and when you should be passing. The biggest thing to think about is it safe to pass? And by safe, I mean, is my opponent at threat of claiming immediately following my pass? And if they do, are they going to get, a larger advantage than me passing will give you? So the first thing to think about always is, what happens if they claim? If I pass and they claim, is that a really bad situation for me? If it is, then, you probably don't want to pass. If you can, if it's not that big of a deal, if you pass and they claim, think about a hard control deck. You're just waiting to remove their unit. If they play nothing and you play nothing, the game goes into later resources. Generally, it's better for you. So there are situations where it's totally fine to let your opponent claim. One of the things that can dictate whether or not it's safe to pass is how many resources you or your opponent have spent. Anytime you're getting a resource advantage, generally it's fine to let your opponent claim and go to the next turn. So if you've spent your resources for the turn and they haven't, you're safe to pass there. It's unlikely that they're gonna claim initiative and not spend resources unless they have the potential to end the game on their first action. So yeah, anytime you've spent and they haven't, you're kind of okay waiting to see what happens as a general rule. This goes the same for if you've spent more resources than them. So later in the game, it's on the 7th resource turn. You've spent 5, they've spent 2. Could you pass? Probably. They're probably going to spend, the other 5 resources they have. So it's fairly safe there. So you can still gain some advantages with a lower risk of them claiming. Another thing to think about is how big the payoff is, right? Is it worth the risk of them claiming? How big of a reward are you going to get by waiting and seeing what they play? So do they have a ship and you're thinking that they might attach a pilot to it and then you can 2-for-1 them? Well, that might be worth it, right? Do they have just a small unit out and you have a removal card? Let's say you're on the 6th resource turn and you're sitting on a Rival's Fall. You don't want to use that on their 3-cost unit on the board. You want to save it for their leader or a 6-cost unit they play. So you're probably okay to pass there. Let them get some damage in. They're going to play a unit at some point that you can get more value out of. You have to be careful here, though, because, sometimes the value you're getting isn't going to be worth the damage you take in passing, right? So let's say change the situation slightly. You've got a no glory only results on the 5 resource turn. They have a 4 cost unit on the board. You have initiative. You could remove it, and then they're going to play a 5 cost unit. You can go to the next turn, or you could wait. You could let them play the 5, then kill that with your no glory. So you're, trying to get a little advantage there. However, you have to think about the damage that they're going to do with that, pass. So essentially, by passing there, you're getting hit once by that 4 cost unit, probably for 4 or 5 damage, and then you're also going to lose initiative because after they play a unit, you remove it, they're going to claim, and they're going to hit you again with that 4 cost unit. So it's like a 8 to 10 damage swing just taking that single pass action. So you have to keep that in the back of your mind. Another thing you can think about is, are you trying to bait them, into making a play, or are you trying to bluff them into not making a play? So maybe you're on 4 resources, you're against a Sabine deck, you're, sitting on a takedown, and you want to pass until they flip their leader, and then you can play your takedown. The one thing about this game that I will say is that it's very hard to bait good players, right? Anytime somebody takes a pass action, and when you're playing as well, if your opponent passes, there should be alarm bells going off in your head, right? Admiral Akbar should be in your ear. It's a trap, right? They're waiting for something, so you got to think about what are they trying to do here, and how can I play around it. Maybe you have a unit on board that you can buff with a hotshot blaster or a pump from hand like a surprise strike, and you're kind of holding that unit up to hostage their leader, right? Wait for their leader flip and take it out in one shot. Maybe their opponent is playing Han 1, and you want to be able to do 6 damage in one swing to prevent them from getting a bigger turn off. So in those situations, you can pass, you're giving up damage to base, but your opponent is going to know something is up. So then you have to think about, again, if I pass and they claim, is that good for me? Well, you might have prevented their leader flip, but you missed damage to base. Maybe that's better for you in the long run. One thing that, just like I said, it's difficult to bait good players. The opposite is, a little bit less true. It's sometimes easier to bluff them. If they're assuming that you're competent at the game, they're going to assume you're not passing for no reason. So they might be thinking, okay, he's waiting or she's waiting to do XYZ play. I'm going to play around it. So sometimes, especially, let's say you've drawn a poor hand, maybe you have nothing to play on turn 4, or the 4 resource turn, sorry. By passing instead of just automatically claiming, you're going to make your opponent play suboptimally, as they're going to be waiting for, okay, what are they doing? So they might not play a 4 cost unit because they don't want it to get removed. They might play a 2 or 3 and see what happens. Or you never know. That sometimes they're not going to make mistakes. They're just going to make you have it, and when you don't, you're out of luck. But it is worth thinking about that sometimes you can kind of pass as a bluff to make your opponent play suboptimally. All right, so let's move on to talking about claiming. Should you claim or not claim? To claim or not to claim? The classic Shakespearean dilemma here. The easiest one to remember for this is, can one of you die in a single action? And sometimes this is harder to calculate. There could be hotshot blasters or surprise strikes from hand or stuff like that. A Delphi fighter, right? To give that extra attack buff. But anytime you're looking at the board and either you can win in a single swing or your opponent can win in a single swing, then you might have to claim. It depends on what resources you have left, what other cards you have on the table that haven't attacked. If you have a way to deal with their unit otherwise, then you can play it slow, right? But if you have no other options to deal with that unit, then you got to claim, look for an answer. Likewise, if your opponent is tapped out of resources, you have a unit that can take them out in one swing, then you might just need to claim right away if they have, no way to interact with it on the board. So that's always something to keep in mind. It happens to everybody. At some point, somebody's going to miss. Oh, shoot, I could have, I was 8 damage away from killing them. I had a hot shot in my row. I didn't think about it. But always be tracking the base totals. Another thing about claiming is how important is initiative next round? Is it worth giving up a smaller chunk of damage to their base in order to claim to make sure I get a bigger chunk of damage in next turn? Something to think about. Am I able to get a really good value trade-off and start controlling the board by giving up, damage or maybe even not spending my full allotment of resources? Maybe you get to flip your leader before them, and that puts you in a nice position on the board. Or maybe it's a really, impactful card that you can play on that turn, and that you want to lead with that to really kind of cement your position. So then maybe claiming is worth it, and you don't need to make all your attacks to base, or you don't need to spend, all your resources if it's going to put you in a really advantaged position. And then lastly, can you gain some information that'll help you in your decisions? So at the end of every turn, you draw 2 cards, and those 2 cards are going to, let you know whether you have options or not. So sometimes, instead of taking an action to end your turn and then your opponent claiming, it's better to claim for yourself, draw your 2 cards, and then lead the next turn with that action. Maybe it's, your last attack that you could make, and it's going to take out their leader, but you might not want to sacrifice your unit if you draw something better the following turn. Or maybe it's a classic example is Target Town, right? Good players are going to always make sure that they're getting the most information. So instead of using Target Town as their last action to kill an opposing unit and then giving up initiative, they'll claim, draw their 2 cards, see what they draw into, and worst case scenario, you can just use Target Town as your first action to clear their unit off. So those are some examples there about information. Next, we are going to get into some clips and see these principles in action. Okay, we're going to look at some clips and play a little game called Is It Safe? I'm going to give you some information and set the scene. You're going to make a decision whether it is safe to pass or not. So here we have a Yoda versus an Anakin. We're in game 2. Yoda is up a game, and Yoda has just finished his activation. Both players have 5 resources that are unspent. In Anakin's hand, he has a blue leader, constable, outer rim constable, and a 3rd card that I am not quite sure what it is. He knows that his opponent plays traitorous in his list. It was played on him in the first game, and that is kind of the scene as it is. So, if you are the Anakin player, is it safe to pass here? If you need a little more time, you can pause the video. My gut instinct would be no, you don't want to pass in this scenario. As Anakin, you are an aggro deck. You want to make sure that, you're playing out your units and ending the game sooner rather than later. Yoda is going to be more capable in the late game than you are. So I would probably play my blue leader, maybe for 5 resources, move to the ground, and have a 5/5. We are going to see that our Anakin player makes a different decision, and they do decide to pass. And I think the concept that illustrates is the risk reward, right? They're taking this risk that both of them will skip the 5 resource turn. They'll get one resource closer to Yoda's flip, but he knows that if that traitorous does get played, he has an absolute commanding response here. That is indeed what happens. And so the constable's going to come down and remove it. and he's going to get to play the blue leader. And so essentially he had got to spend all 5 of his resources, and because the traders got instantly removed, his opponent did nothing this turn. So I think the potential was so large. That is the reason that, it's the risk reward thing. That's the reason the pass was made there, and it ends up paying off. All right, we have clip number 2 here. We've got Vader versus Talzin. It's game 1. They're on the 5 resource turn. Vader has ramped, so he is at 6 resources with 3 remaining. Talzin has 1 left. Vader just played an I Am Your Father on Chirrut, and the Talzin player removed the Chirrut. And he has in hand 1 more I Am Your Father and a resupply. So action is on the Vader player. Is it safe to pass in this scenario? If you need a little more time, just pause the video. In this case, no, I do not think this is safe to pass. The Talzin player is going to know that you're waiting for something, right? You've just played 1 I'm Your Father. Another one would deal 7 to Talzin and kill her. And so the Talzin player is just going to happily go to the next turn, and you have 3 unspent resources. So in this case, as we see, what they're going to do instead, after he checks out the fancy showcase Vader there, what the Vader player is going to do instead is he's just going to play the resupply. All right, he spends all his resources for the turn. Now he's at 7. He's threatening the Vader flip. If Talzin does flip, he can just answer it very cleanly. And Talzin, in this case, is going to look at the situation, going to make a claim, and Vader's going to make a very good pass here. The temptation would be you're on 7, deploy Vader, get some damage into the base, but then you might walk into a Power of the Dark Side. So a very good non-pass followed by a very good pass there. All right, for our next clip here, we have a Piet versus a Krennic. This is the 4 resource turn. Krennic's up a game. Action is on Piet right now. Both of them have 4 resources unspent and 1 attack each that they could potentially make. The question, is it safe to pass? If you need some more time, go ahead and pause. I think that in this case, yes, it's safe to pass. Especially with an attack waiting here, you can feel fairly confident that the Krennic is going to at least make that action. And so he does pass. Krennic does make that action. And here he passes again. And now Krennic's going to claim. And so I think the second one got a little bit greedy. I don't exactly know. It's hard to see his hand there. He was waiting for Krennic to play something to run that super laser tech into. It's possible that he didn't have anything to play on 5 resources anyway, and he was just hoping for the best. But Krennic, in his hand, he had a Pershing and more expensive cards. So, he could play the Pershing for 2, and then probably Piet would play something, but he just figured I might as well just take the pass here. I'm not optimizing my resources this turn, so I'm not going to allow my opponent to. All right, and now here we have another example. Ping Tarkentown mirrors. While they are going away soon, if you are preparing for regionals, this is something that you need to be aware of. Whoever goes second in a Ping Tarkentown mirror generally wins, so it leads to some very interesting situations. So we're going to see here Wu passes into George, and George also, or just takes the claim there, thinking, you know what, I don't like the look of my hand right now for this first turn as Cad. Let's see how it looks on the second turn. And I think he draws into a third turn one play, so now he's feeling confident that he can play out 3 turn one plays and make up for any disadvantage. And we're going to see the Greedo and the Stormtrooper there are the other options. He's going to play the Greedo and get a ping in. Look at removing that Grindon. Unfortunately, Wu has the answer here in a McClunky, and he's just going to clean up both those units. It's a pretty big blowout, and now he realizes that if he plays a third Stormtrooper, his opponent is going to just remove it with his Cad Ping on his next turn. So he passes, and we go to the next round. So now we're on 4 resources, and we're back in the same situation. Who is going to put something down first that can be pinged and potentially removed from Tarkin Town? In theory, something with 5 health would be safe to play here. George decides, I believe, that he's going to pass into Wu, and Wu says, yeah, that's fine. Let's go to the next round. I want to draw some more cards and give myself more options. So in the Tarkin Town ping mirrors, things can get pretty crazy. Yeah, make sure you think about what your opponent can do and that you have an answer for, potentially losing your unit first to Tarkin Town before you start, making plays. All right, we are going to move on to claiming. So, going to play a similar game. We'll lay out the situation, and you can decide whether you would claim or not to claim. So this is Kazer's Krennic, Philip versus Mickey at the Beatle event, and we have on the board Han has put about 15 damage into Mickey's base, but Mickey has taken the board back over with a mace, and then he's got R2-D2, the 2-4, and Padme, his leader there. So we are going to have Philip respond to this board state. Mickey's tapped out for the turn now. He's just played a mace. Philip is going to come in with a Han, and he's going to remove the mace. So now Mickey is left with an R2 and a Padme staring down the Han Solo 6/6 unit. So if you are Mickey here, would you claim? Would you put some damage into Han? Would you put some damage into the base? What would you do? If you need some more time, just go ahead and pause. We are going to see here that he considers it for a minute, but ultimately he is going to end up claiming. The units that he has on board do not have enough attack to remove Han, so if he does anything but claim right now, Han is going to get another attack to base and do 6 to 9 damage, depending on potential pumps. He needs to find an answer for this Han, otherwise the game is just going to get away from him at this point. So he draws a couple more cards, and he ends up picking up, I believe, a surprise strike to trade his leader for Han. Is that what happens? No, he's waiting for Philip to resource. Yeah, so he did draw the answer. He trades his unit leader for Han, and it helps him at least start stabilizing the board. Letting that Han attack would have just been too backbreaking. So a good claim there, gets rewarded and gets his answer. All right, next we have Kaz versus Krennic. This is the 4 resource turn. They're both tapped out. There's a little bit of damage on both base, and Kaz has the option of either getting in for 2 more damage or claiming and going to the next round. If you are the Kaz player, what do you do? If you need some more time, just go ahead and pause. And the answer here is that initiative on the 5 resource turn for green villain, always a threat of overwhelming barrage. Especially when you have something in play like that stolen hauler that you can see there. Losing that would be really detrimental, so he's just going to claim, not get the attack in. That way he can open with his Kazuda attack next turn and blank the downside of the hauler before his opponent has a chance to remove it. So ultimately, the 2 damage there to base, not worth the risk, even though Kazuda is an aggro deck, and that is his game plan. So he's going to make his first attack. He's going to turn off the downsides of his ships. All right. We have now our same Gar player versus Talzin. It is the second turn. Gar spent his resources on a Power of the Dark Side to kill Talzin's turn 1 play. Talzin responded with a Jedi in Hiding, which has hidden. So if you're the Gar player here, to claim or not to claim, are you going to get your 3 damage into base, or claim and go to the next round? If you need some more time, you go ahead and pause. I think this answer to this question depends a little bit on the matchup. If the Gar player feels like he's the aggro deck or not, if he wants to just start pushing that damage to his opponent's base. Ultimately, we have to remember that this meta was the Legends of the Force meta, and so an extra consideration is how important the Force is and the danger of Force throw. So he is going to claim here and then just use his first action on this turn to remove the Jedi in Hiding, to deny his opponent access to the Force, and to deny his opponent a unit on the board that could enable Force throw. So in that case, making that attack and losing initiative, the risk was very high that bad things would happen to him. All right, still from Galactics last year. This time we've got Kylo Turkentown, piloted by Ian, against Sabine ECL. So they have both played their turn 1 units. The initiative right now is with, or the action is with Ian on Kylo. He has at least 1 upgrade in hand that we know of, and so he could cycle that away to get some more cards in hand and dig deeper into his deck, or he could claim the initiative and go to next turn. So to claim or not to claim. If you need a little more time, go ahead and pause. In this case, he's not going to waste time cycling because he feels like he is the more defensive deck and he needs to remove his opponent's threats in the early game and give him time to build up to that big Kylo flip. So he's going to go straight into the next round and deal with his opponent's turn 1 play with his first action and just keep his base healthy. So I use the Perilous there to wipe out the A-Wing. A red 3 gets played, and you can see, claim again. I don't need to push that 2 damage to base. I don't need to cycle my upgrades. What I need to do is keep removing your units and getting myself closer and closer to the late game. So really consistent play here, knows the matchup and knows what his job is in the early game. And there's a power of the dark side. So, all right. So here we have an Anakin and a Yoda. We are in game 2. Yoda is up a game. And they're both tapped out for the turn. Anakin has a General's Blade on him, and he has one action left to take, or he can claim and retain the initiative and go to the next turn. So, to claim or not to claim, what do you think? If you need some more time, you can go ahead and pause. In this case, he is going to make the attack into the opposing village protector here, as we are going to see in a moment. But I think the proper course of action would have been to claim. Making this attack as the first action of your next turn is going to be more beneficial because you're going to get the discount on General's Blade. So it's not a massive thing, but maybe it could come into play, right? Other than that, not the end of the world, but still little edges is what you're looking for. All right, and here we have a Palpatine and a Han to ECL. Palpatine is on the 8 resource turn. It is his turn to act. He can flip Palpatine right now and take the Sabine's Masterpiece. He has only 1 resource left and nothing to play, so it's either flip Palp and take the Masterpiece or claim. What would you do to claim or not to claim? This is a case of claiming being something that gives you more information. So by flipping right now, he would simply give up the 2 cards that he's going to draw, the information of those 2 cards, versus flipping, with his first action on the next turn. So he's going to think about it for a little bit. Ultimately here, he's going to make the right call, and he's going to claim. So yeah, he does claim, and then his opponent has nothing left to do, so he'll pass. Palpatine gets to see a couple more cards. Now he saw, I've got a unit I could maybe play and get another ping out. But he's just going to make his first action the same thing he would have ended last turn with, and that's take the Masterpiece. Alright, and last but not least, we have a Han Yellow Mirror match here. Both leaders have been removed already from play. John Yellow has a Qui-Gon who can swing for lethal if he gets an opportunity or action to. He also has a Ready Spy, and he hasn't spent his resources yet. J-Fire has no ready ground units. They're both exhausted. He has 2 ready units in space, and he has 5 resources up. The action is on John Yellow. So with that lethal threat of Qui-Gon presented, would you claim or not claim? If you need a little more time, you can pause. While it would be tempting to claim, you have to remember your opponent still has unspent resources, so they can respond. So he makes the correct play here, puts the spy into the base, and just makes his opponent either deal with Qui-Gon or give him more information. He spends some of his resources. So now at this point, it might be different if his opponent, took another action. You could maybe then think about claiming, but now here he does have the Plo Koon to take out Qui-Gon and take himself out of check, although still not in a great spot, and does end up going the way of John Yellow. So hopefully you were able to learn something about claiming and passing in these clips. Remember, lots of practice, there's lots of nuance. Different situations are going to keep cropping up, but hopefully there were some helpful guidelines there that can help you make the right decisions in the future. Till the next time, thanks for stopping in.